writing you a song. Say I'll be a big girl, yeah, I tell you on the phone. Cause even better, I get myself together. I said Sean, tell you how I felt all along. But every time we meet, boy, I get cold feet. I mean, stutter. Another time I tell you how it be. I play it low key, but I'm so sick of it. Now I'm running. Cause independent women, yeah, I done it. Cause I need somebody to keep me warm. Now when the lights are down and the music's gone and you on, now you be the perfect match. I say,
abstract writing on my Facebook stat.
I'm trying to let you know that I've been holding back. I'm so scared of rejection and that's a fact. So I tiptoe, but one day I shall attack. I'll make it as clear to you as white on black that I love you, baby.
So I can see you? I just arrived about an hour ago. I just went through Canadian customs an hour ago. And it was the first time that I went through so quickly. Maybe they felt your energy. Well, let me thank the Fro Foundation for having invited me to participate in your celebration of Black History Month. And I am totally impressed by the work that the foundation has done and continues to do, especially with respect to artists and cultural workers. We need the creativity, we need the visions, we need the imagination of artists and poets who teach us to dream and to struggle for the realization of our dreams. So thank you very much, Fro Foundation. I forgot to look at my watch to see what time I started speaking because because I know we're supposed to have a conversation afterwards. But the point that I want to make about Black History Month is that it is the history of the quest for liberation. And it belongs to all people who identify with and cherish historical and ongoing struggles for freedom. Black history, whether here in North America or in Africa or in Europe, has always been infused with a spirit of resistance. And when we celebrate Black history, it's not primarily for the purpose of representing Black people in the numerous roles as first to break the barriers of racism, although that's very important as well. Although there are a lot of firsts I don't celebrate. I'm thinking about someone like Condoleezza Rice. Remember when she became the first Black woman Secretary of State? That was not a victory. But I think we should periodically reflect on how we think about issues of race. And it's not all straightforward. Just as I was saying, when I say white men, I'm not talking about all white men. I'm not talking about working class white men who have been associated with the struggle against racism. I'm not talking about people like John Brown historically, for example. They don't fit into that shorthand that we use. But let me say that even though it may be important to acknowledge these, first, we celebrate Black history because it is a centuries-old struggle for freedom, a centuries-old struggle to expand the parameters of freedom for everyone, for everyone. Now, some of you may have seen the film Lincoln, right? No?
Yes.
And you probably also know that this is the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Oh.
And it's so bizarre. I would have thought that had slavery really been abolished, we would be celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. Nobody has celebrated. I mean, a few things here and there, but there have not been any calls for any massive celebrations of what is often represented as a major step toward Black freedom. Maybe it wasn't such a major step towards Black freedom. Maybe that is why it's not being celebrated. As a matter of fact, if we look carefully at that document, we see that it was a military strategy. It wasn't really about liberating people of African descent from an oppressive system of slavery. It was about saving the Union. And if you read the document itself, you'll see that most of the words in that document are devoted to a description of the exceptions, that is to say, which parts of the country got to keep their slaves. And it's quite bizarre because the Union, states that remain within the Union, and even neighborhoods that remain loyal to the Union got to keep their slaves. So if you look at the document that Lincoln issued, you see that it is about creating a situation that would produce a military crisis. And that is to say, in a sense you can say Lincoln was very shrewd. Because even though he wasn't at that time that concerned about freeing Black people, he was concerned about keeping the Union and retaining the strength of the Union. So he knew that if he issued this Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, that vast numbers of Black people would, as W.E.B. Du Bois put it, withdraw their labor from the planters and the other members of the slaveholding class, and they would give that labor to the Union Army. And he knew that Black people would fight far more passionately than any of the white soldiers to save the Union, because it meant the possibility of freedom. So in a sense, Lincoln was really shrewd. And it was a powerful military strategy that won. And as a matter of fact, W.E.B. Du Bois, in his amazing description of the end of the Civil War and the period of radical reconstruction that followed it, argues that it was Black soldiers that won the Civil War. Black soldiers won the Civil War. Now, the film addresses the 13th Amendment, and the backstory of that film is that it took Lincoln a while to become convinced that it was important to not only abolish slavery, but to envision a society, to envision a future in which black people would still be present. At the time he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, he assumed that the vast majority of free black people were going to be transported to an area of Africa. He was for colonization. But by the time that he argued for the 13th Amendment, he had been persuaded that black people would be members of a future U.S. society. But some of you have probably read the 13th Amendment. I mean, I know that you're not expected to know U.S. history. This is not the U.S. This is Canada. But I've always been amazed that people can assume that a few lines constituting an amendment to the Constitution could eradicate a system of slavery that had such a long history, that was so much a part of the fabric of U.S. society, the culture of U.S. society, the economy. A few, maybe 20 words, you append those to the Constitution and slavery's over. That makes no sense. Well, the amendment actually does contain an exception as well, and that exception is people who are convicted of committing crimes. So the Constitution allowed for slavery to continue as long as people who were treated as slaves were convicted criminals. I'd say even a glimpse of socialism back then. But with the overturning of radical Reconstruction, we had the creation of Jim Crow laws, the worst kind of racism imaginable. Well, perhaps I shouldn't say the worst kind of racism imaginable, because this is how we think about racism in the 21st century. We think about that period when everything was segregated, when black people didn't have access to education. And now we assume that because there are black people who are in important positions, some black people have been educated, right? We even have black people who are in the hierarchies of major corporations, right? We even have a black person who is president, right? But what has fundamentally changed? Immediately after the election, many prisoners said there may be one black man in the White House, but there are 1 million black men in the big house. And so it's important to consider structural racism. Racism that asserts itself often silently through the structures of the major institution of society. So when you say the fight is not over, we're also saying that this will perhaps be one of the most difficult fights. Because we're challenging a racism that many people don't even acknowledge as being racism. And racism makes a difference when it comes to who gets to go to the university and who gets to go to prison. It makes a difference when it comes to who feels safe when they see a policeman or a policewoman, and who fears the presence of the police in hyper saturated communities that are the communities that produce the unfortunate people who end up spending much of their lives in prison. But as we think about the indivisibility of justice, we have to say that it is not simply an issue of racism isolated from heteropatriarchy, or racism isolated from struggles to save the environment, or racism isolated from homophobia, or racism isolated from food politics. The challenge of this era is grasping all of the connections, grasping the indivisibility of justice, recognizing, and I should say that I was actually very impressed by Obama's inauguration speech, when he referred to Seneca Falls, Selma, and Stonewall. And what he was suggesting was that there is a connection between the struggle for women's rights, the struggle against racism, and the ongoing struggle against homophobia. I like to take a feminist position with respect to Obama, because there are a lot of things I don't like about Obama. There are a lot of criticisms I have, but at the same time, I think his election has made a difference. So I want to both be able to be fiercely critical of him, and I also want to fiercely support him. And that fierce support is not so much the support for an individual, but rather it is the support for vast numbers of people, largely young people, who in the first place refused to believe that it was impossible to elect a black man to the presidency of the United States of America, when everybody else said it is impossible. They refused to believe. And this last time around, as I pointed out, when people were not turned away by the voter suppression tactics, because you see, Romney was really sure he was going to win. He was positive. And many of us were very scared. As a matter of fact, I decided that I was not going to go to sleep this time until I heard his concession speech. Because I remember 2000 when I went to sleep and Al Gore was the president of the United States of America. And then I woke up to an 8-year-long nightmare. An 8-year-long nightmare. So I stayed awake until I le français, alors mon français n'est pas très bien.
Si, il est très bien.
We have a question.
J'ai pas de questions à vous poser parce que ça fait très longtemps que je vous suis. Pendant que vous étiez en prison, j'étais très jeune. Je suis cubaine, je viens de Cuba. Et puis après que vous êtes sortis, bon, je suis toujours au courant de ce que vous faites. Par contre, ce soir, vraiment, j'aimerais vous remercier de tout mon cœur à mon propre nom et au nom de toutes les Cubaines, pour l'apport que vous nous avez donné pendant notre lutte et tout l'effort que vous avez fait pour votre peuple nous a servi comme exemple.
Donc j'ai une question ici en haut. Vous ne laissez pas répondre en français?
Alors, merci beaucoup. Et la révolution cubaine était toujours une grande inspiration pour moi. Wow.
Je disais à mon ami, à un autre que j'ai rencontré ce soir, que vous avez été comme un fantôme du point de vue positif pour toute la jeunesse cubaine pendant beaucoup d'années. Fantôme comme exemple, fantôme de force.
Mais, merci beaucoup, mais je voudrais dire quelque chose. C'était que ce n'était pas vraiment moi comme individu, c'était tous les gens qui ont organisé ce très grand mouvement partout dans le monde. Ce n'était pas moi, c'était le mouvement. Alors, je crois qu'il est très nécessaire que la jeunesse aujourd'hui sache qu'il est possible d'atteindre des victoires. Si on organise, si on lutte, et si on a une vision de justice indivisible.
En haut, j'ai entendu en haut, oui.
Hi. Hi, Angela.